Hi and welcome. I'm Carolyn Gage and this is Zibby Wilder, and we are here for a quick minute to talk about the upcoming Zoom reading on January 7th. This is going to be free. Georgia and the Butch. This is a reading of selected letters between the celebrated artist Georgia O'Keeffe and a lesbian half her age named Maria Chabot, who has been largely written out of history along with this intense 9-year relationship that was so key to Georgia's work. And we are doing this project to write her back in. Information on how to register for this free reading may be found below the video on my YouTube channel. So I'm a playwright, and Zibby is a writer, digital storyteller, and consultant specializing in the research, creation, and implementation of engaging and accessible heritage communications and program initiatives. And what a perfect person for this project. She is the great niece of Maria Chabot, and she is 70% of the way through writing Maria's official biography. So welcome, and she's also the world authority on the subject. So welcome, Zibby. Why don't you start out by telling us what you learned from your family about Maria and when it was that you really dug your got your claws into the material and became passionate about working with her history.
All right. Well, we didn't know anything about Maria really until the 90s. My mom, who's an artist, was invited to study at the Tamarind Institute of Lithography at the University of New Mexico. And while she was in Albuquerque, a cousin of hers said, "Hey, we have this relative who lives here. She's really interesting. Do you want to meet her?" And my mom said, "Yes, of course." So they went to Maria's, and as was always the case with Maria, she had some tests before she would allow she wouldn't allow just anyone in her home. My mom passed those tests, and they formed, somewhat of a friendship. And my mom left that meeting with a magazine called El Palacio, which is the magazine of the Museum of New Mexico. And it had Maria on the cover, and a cover story about the mother of the Indian market. She brought that back to me. I think I was in high school or college, and said, "Look at this aunt that I have. She's so amazing." And I read it and I thought, who is this woman? She lived with Georgia O'Keeffe. She started the, world famous Indian market in New Mexico, like all of these things. So I flew down here to Albuquerque at some point. It was the mid 90s to meet her, and she would not see me. So I never got to meet her. And then, years later, I came across the letters book that the readings will be from, and read through the whole thing, and was just, I couldn't get her off my mind. So I found where these letters came from, and I found the archive, I visited it, and ultimately, think about a couple of months after I found out about it, I actually moved to Santa Fe to go through the archives and get to know Maria that way.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that was when you began to just feel this was a mission that you were on, to put that out there. Can you tell us briefly what is in this archive?
Well, Maria was, thankfully for us, a bit of a hoarder. And the archive is everything. It's her entire life. It's everything from genealogy books from France back in the 1400s to the actual label cut off Levi's that she had bought for Georgia, photographs, advertisements from the newspaper clippings, and then, thousands and probably tens of thousands of pages of short stories, journals. Just everything. It was she was a thinker and a writer, and she wrote down everything she thought. So it's not just the things that she was, keeping track of doing with this famous person. It was her entire life, and her innermost thoughts, and her fears, and her anxieties, and everything. So it's like, going inside her mind.
Yeah, and given, well, you were saying there's been access issues with this. When did it become publicly accessible?
Well, it was professionally archived probably about 3 years ago. So it's been available. It was available to the public. It just hadn't really been archived, professionally. So it was very hard to find things within it. But now it has been, and it is open to the public.
I'm just so thrilled that you exist, and that you're doing this work. My interest is that of, hidden lesbian history and culture, and particularly for butch women, gender nonconforming lesbian women. So that leads into the next question. Can you talk to us about how Maria has been treated so far in the biographies of O'Keeffe? And perhaps I've been harsh on people about this because I didn't realize it's so recent that the archive has been available. So maybe some of it came from ignorance. I think a lot of it, to me, is homophobia. But yeah, can you talk about how she is discussed or treated in these biographies? The relationship, of course, is Alfred Stieglitz. And by the time she comes along, George is in her mid-50s. Stieglitz has another girlfriend, extremely young, that's kind of taken up the space of a lover in his life. I mean, it's not the great love story of the century, Georgia and Alfred, anymore. And the intimacy between her and Maria, to me, in many ways, seems to supplant it. That is never even remotely suggested anywhere. But I'm talking and you're supposed to talk. So can you talk about the treatment of her, what you think that's about, and what you'd like to see happen?
It seems, she's always referred to as an assistant or an associate, or just a friend, and she was so much more than that. Of course, there was a friendship there, but it was a different kind of friendship. I think is a friendship a lot of us don't have, we never experienced, because it was so far beyond the norms of what a normal friendship would be, of the normal give and take of a friendship. There was a lot of give and a lot of take, but never back and forth. It was kind of one-sided.
Well, and also in saying that, and Georgia did have assistants later on and before. Maria was not paid a wage, nor was she, on salary, nor did she ever invoice Georgia. She would receive checks from her from time to time, but repeatedly, and you'll hear this in the reading, it's like, Georgia, I do this for love, like I do everything. That's not an assistant. And I feel like it is there's friendship. There's a little bit of a mother-daughter dynamic. There's also a mentor, kind of a guru and student thing. And I feel like there is lover energy all through it, and perhaps most recognizable to the outside world in those early years. But I feel it goes right all the way through to 9 years later. It's almost impossible to categorize what their relationship was in a heteronormative sense. You can see these biographers struggling for, where do we slot her? And it's like, well, you need to have a real deep understanding of butch identity and lesbian history and culture in order to understand what exactly it was between these two women. I don't even see an attempt made at that.
Well, and I think a lot, at the time that a lot of these biographies were written, Maria was still alive. So her, at that time, her archive wasn't available because she had it. And even, I don't think that anybody would have even been able to jump into it until they got into these to read about her, because her sexuality was not something she publicly discussed with anyone.
Well, and also, in fairness, until 2003, if you were to write that about a living person, you would be subject to libel unless you had kind of photographic evidence or something. People were fairly squirrely about that until
Yeah.
after 2003, when it became not a libel situation anymore.
Okay. Yeah. But you know, she it wasn't something she discussed. Barbara Buehler-Lines, who is one of the editors of the Book of Letters, and a very good friend of Maria's, you know, she said we never once discussed her sexuality or her private life at all. Because it was something that Maria struggled with her entire life, and she didn't know how to discuss, and she just kept doing her own thing and doing it the way that she wanted. And so I think, you know, I think it's a really interesting time having this archive of Maria's that is her life in her words. You know, really can change the narrative and can change the dynamic and bring into play a lot of the issues that you're addressing, as well as so many others. She was an extremely complex person, and, you know, living in a time and in a place where there wasn't a lot of support for her in a lot of ways. So
I just want to tell one anecdote. We should wrap this up because we're going to like sound like the event itself. But there's reference to Georgia doing a painting of her called Maria Dancing. And I'm like, where is it? Where is it? Somebody's got to have a photograph. And I couldn't find it anywhere. And it seemed it was destroyed and that there never was a photograph of it. And Zibby, will you tell us what you learned about that? This to me is the most lesbian thing on the planet. But we just, George's, what Maria did and George's response.
I guess they went to a party at someone's house somewhere up near around Abiquiu Ghost Ranch, and there was a drunk army, some young man from the army who was kind of giving Maria some flack, and she got pissed off and stabbed him.
but here's the best. Georgia made a painting, an abstract painting about it, and titled it Maria Dancing.
It was Maria Goes to a Party.
Oh, Maria goes to a party.
What happens when Maria goes to a party?
She gets all stabby. I love it. I absolutely love that. Well, I think on that note, you know, we will close this because we really want people to come to this event. It's free. I really want you to encourage lesbian publishers, lesbian archivists, lesbian historians, and you know, everybody else, of course. But this situation needs to change, and Zibby deserves a huge amount of support. I was saying we need to have a Maria Chabot conference and look at all these aspects: the lesbian aspect, the Abiquiu, the construction. She designed it. She was general contractor. She built it. It's a show place. People come from around the world. She was not a builder, nor was she an architect. People come from around the world to see that house. And it absolutely is a manifestation of the spirit of the woman that she loved. It's phenomenal. All right, Zibby, thank you so much. I can't wait to see you on the 7th. And I think we're going to have some real interesting, we have opportunity for questions and answers at the end. And I just would love to, I could listen to you talk all day about what you have learned about this woman. All right, so I'm going to end this now, and I will end the recording. Yeah.